Good morning. Welcome to our Red Tire group in English. Hope everybody's well. This morning, I'd like to share with you this amazing little pamphlet that I've treasured for years. It's called Turning Suffering and Happiness into Enlightenment by Jigme Tempe Nima, the third Drodrupchen Rinpoche. So I think it's probably still available online. It's translated by Rigpa, but it's quite an amazing teaching. So there's two parts of the teaching: how to use suffering as the path and how to use happiness as the path. And each one is approached through relative truth and then absolute truth. So let's begin this morning with how to use suffering as the path to enlightenment. First of all, through relative truth. Whenever you are harmed by sentient beings or anything else, if you make a habit out of just perceiving only the suffering, then when even the smallest problem comes up, it will cause you enormous anguish in your mind. This is because the nature of any perception or idea, be it happiness or suffering, is to grow stronger and stronger by being repeated. When the power of this repetitive experience gradually increases, after a while, most of what you perceive will become the cause of actually attracting unhappiness towards you, and happiness will never get a chance. If you do not realize that it all depends on the way in which your mind develops that habit, and instead you put the blame on external objects and situations alone, the flames of suffering, negative karma, aggression, and so forth will spread like wildfire with no end. This is what is called all appearances and perceptions arise as enemies, or the whole world turns hostile. So if you cultivate a negative, critical state of mind and you find defects in everything and everyone, the only natural outcome of that can only be that at some point it seems like everyone and everything is your enemy. That's the only natural outcome. So it's very, very easy to have a critical mind and find defects and faults in other people and other things. It's one of the easiest things you can do is complain and criticize. But we need to understand that by repeating that as a habit, it's going to only get stronger and stronger. And then we need to take it one step further with our logic and understand that the ultimate outcome of that is seeing the whole world as an enemy, and everything is defective and everything is hostile. You should arrive at a very precise understanding that the whole reason why sentient beings in this degenerate age are plagued by so much suffering is because of the weakness of their power to discern, and to realize that it all depends on the way in which your mind develops that habit. And instead, you put the blame on external objects and situations. So you're not understanding that the cause of all your happiness, the cause of all your suffering, has always been the mind, could never be anything except the mind. So every time we blame our problems and suffering on outside circumstances, we strengthen that habit of confusion and delusion. So, not to be hurt by the obstacles created by enemies, illness, or harmful influences does not mean to say that things like sickness can be simply driven away and that they will never occur again. Rather, it means that they will not be able to obstruct you from transforming them into your ultimate long-term benefit. In order for this to happen, you need to first get rid of the attitude of only wanting yourself not to suffer. And secondly, Cultivate the attitude of actually being joyful when suffering arises. First of all, reject the attitude of only wanting yourself not to suffer. Convince yourself over and over again from your own experience of both the uselessness and the bitter pain involved in regarding suffering as something purely harmful and undesirable, and how much nervous anxiety you go through simply from trying to avoid suffering. At the same time, go over in your mind again and again the thought that from now on, whatever suffering I face, I will not become anxious. And train yourself to develop a strong feeling of courage to confront suffering when it does arise. First, let's look at how useless it is. If you can do something to solve a problem, then there's no need to worry or be unhappy about it. But if you can't, then it doesn't help to worry or be unhappy about it either. As long as we don't get anxious and irritated, then our strength of mind will enable us to bear even the hardest of sufferings with ease. They will feel insubstantial and flimsy like cotton wool. When we do get anxious and irritated, even the smallest problem becomes aggravated and magnified by an intense feeling of resistance and unhappiness, making it extremely difficult to deal with that situation. Let's take for the example fantasizing about some beautiful or attractive object or person. As long as you continue to dwell on their attractive qualities, then however much you try to get rid of your desire and attachment, it will just exhaust you. Similarly, while dwelling only on the painful qualities of suffering, you will never be able to develop any kind of endurance or the strength to bear it. So, as the instructions, as in the instructions on sealing the doors of the senses, you must not focus on the suffering and latch onto its characteristics. Instead, learn to leave your mind undisturbed in its own natural state. Learn to leave Learn to leave your mind undisturbed in its own natural state. Bring your mind home, rest there, and let it find its own ground.